Hello again, Gary Stearman with another edition of Prophecy in the News, and with me today in studio, Bob Ulrich. We'll be right back in just a few seconds to talk about giants. Well, there are a lot of reasons to discuss some of the less discussed topics in the Bible, and today we're going to show you why we think the subject of giants is an important subject. Bob, we've talked a lot about this off the air. I think giants need to be discussed in the context of Bible prophecy.
Well, there's no question about it. It's a subject that is pretty much completely neglected in the churches today. You're not going to go on a Sunday morning and hear a message about the giants of the Bible. It's rated PG, isn't it?
It certainly is.
If there's small children in the room today, you may want to move them over into another corner and turn on another television, because we're going to discuss some things that are pretty complicated, but things that I feel are really, really necessary to understand the Bible as a whole.
Now, Peter, in 2 Peter chapter 3, says this, and I know you're familiar with this scripture, 3:3, 2 Peter, knowing this first, there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they are willingly ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Well, Peter is talking about the world being overflowed with water. At the very least, he's talking about the great flood of Noah. And Bob, he goes on here to talk about the great span of creation, from the old world all the way to the creations of the new heaven and the new earth. And he adds a little footnote by Paul. He refers to Brother Paul in 2 Peter 3:16, saying this, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, lest which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest as they do other scriptures under their own destruction. In other words, Peter is adding a footnote to his thoughts about the creation, the flood, the old world, the new world, and he's saying, in effect, this is going to be hard to understand, but you need to look at it.
Well, this is more than hard to understand. This is kind of like the day I told my 7-year-old son the Easter Bunny didn't exist. And he just looked at me like, well, what do you mean? I get an Easter basket every year. This is a story in the Bible that a lot of people, to be frank and just flat out, disagree with, don't understand. There's a lot of ignorance involved. But many years ago, you wrote an article, and the name of the article was Things Hard to be Understood.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten it, because this passage in 2 Peter chapter 3 explains so much of the misunderstandings that revolve around Christianity today. People don't understand many times out of biblical ignorance.
They don't understand that there was a fall of Satan, which destroyed the universe, which required that the universe had to be reconstructed, and which required the coming of a promised Messiah. And the function of the Messiah was not only to save mankind, but to save the entire universe. And he had to do that in response to what Satan had already done before the creation, and that is to destroy it. And the remedy, of course, was the Messiah, who came in the form of a human being. Well, that's very basic to what we're talking about.
Well, Satan is at the root cause of all this. And if you actually follow his trail throughout history, and I know there's going to come a point in the future where you're going to write a book about this, aren't you?
I'm on my way.
I know you are, and it's one of the most fascinating subjects to me, because if you can't understand where Satan came from,
right,
and where Satan went, and you follow literally his footprints throughout the Bible, and every one of them is, if I can use the phrase, hell-bent on corrupting what God made. I mean, Satan is the great usurper, and he wants to destroy the great model of creation that God called very good.
Absolutely. And furthermore, Satan very well understood God's plan to redeem the universe, which would involve a Messiah. And Satan fought that at every turn. In fact, the Lord allowed him access, I think, to the plan of redemption and salvation. He tempted Christ when he came. Long before that, he corrupted Adam and Eve, and after Adam and Eve had sinned and gone out into the world, we find that in Genesis chapter 6, it came to pass when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born unto them, but the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. In other words, we have here the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, the angelic creatures of God, looked down on earth women and lusted after them. They took wives of all whom they chose, and the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And the next sentence, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men. Those would be the Titans of old, the Olympians, the Greek and Roman giants of mythology, except the Jews never believed those were mythological creatures. Josephus said that the Titans were one and the same as these mighty men mentioned in Genesis. So we've got a story here that has to be told.
We've got a tall tale here, but it's right out of the pages of the Bible. So if you're watching the program today, don't disagree with the messengers, because we're taking the message right from the Word of God.
Right.
And Genesis 6 is just one passage that talks about the angels. The book of Jude, of course, talks about the fallen angels, talks about angels who kept not their first estate, but were kept in chains for the last day. So there's a dark story here, and what you've just told us right out of Genesis 6 is that these angels left their first estate in heaven. They obviously had a free will, and they came to earth and procreated with human women who they lusted after, who they found attractive. If you go into the ancient book of Enoch, it says, and of course Enoch is not gospel and not the canon of Scripture, but in the book of Enoch, which a lot of old-time historians valued greatly, it says clearly that these angels looked upon the women and their long hair, and they found that very attractive. And of course you read the writings of Paul later in the Gospels, where he talks about women hiding their hair, putting their hair up.
Absolutely, and there is a spiritual component to all this, and that spiritual component has to do with the fall and with sin. There was a fall in heaven as well as a fall on earth, and that fall produced a race of giants called the fallen ones, the Nephilim. That's who we're talking about, which comes from the Hebrew verb nafal, which means to fall. In fact, nafal gives us our English word fall, just as a little side issue there. But the Bible says there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. In other words, before the flood and also after the flood.
A two-headed sword.
Yeah.
They came back. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But when you talk about those giants, the Israelites knew about the giants, didn't they?
Absolutely. In fact, in the books of Moses, Deuteronomy 2:20, and I'm going to just read a few selections here, where when the Israelites came up on the east side of the Jordan, we have these words, that also was accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelt there in old time. The Ammonites called them Zamzummim. Deuteronomy 3:11, Og, king of Bashan, remained as a remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was as a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah, the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, 4 cubits the breadth, and this would translate into about a 16-foot bed. And Og was a real giant. I could go on and on. When Joshua came, he fought giants on many occasions in a place called the Valley of the Rephaim. Well, the Valley of the Rephaim, Rephaim is another Hebrew word that has to do with giants. And if you look, Bob, and we don't have time to do that on a 30-minute program, at all the references to the Rephaim, to the giants in the Old Testament, you go all the way up through Isaiah and Jeremiah, you go up through the prophets who lived at the time of the captivities. The giants were a very big part of the ancient Israelites' lives. They were quite real. Everybody understood that they were in existence.
Well, when God told the Israelites to take the promised land, I'm not quite sure they knew what they were in store for. In fact, when Joshua and Caleb went in to scout out the promised land with the 10 other spies, they came back. Their comment was, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. They'd never seen anything like it. They were terrified. And yet Joshua and Caleb said, well, let's go do what the Lord told us to do. So an awful lot of the Old Testament history revolves around Israel cleansing the promised land of this gigantic hybrid race of fallen angels and human women. And it must have been a nightmare. In fact, I have a picture here I wanted to show you real quick. This is actually a picture of a place in northern Israel that lies on the Israeli-Syrian border, and it's called Mount Hermon. And I don't know if you can see this cave here, but I look at this picture and I can almost see a 10-foot, a 12-foot, a 15-foot, an 18-foot. Author Stephen Quayle claims that some of the giant skeletons that have been discovered in the ancient past were as big as 38 feet tall.
Absolutely.
Now, I can't verify that because I've never seen those giant skeletons. What happened to those?
This brings up the point, Bob, because if you go back in history, recent history, back around 60 years before World War II, virtually every museum on Earth had a giant exhibit. I've talked to people who have visited the Arizona Natural History Museum back around the end of World War II, and an elderly gentleman said that he knew that there were at least 3 giant skeletons and 1 giant mummy on display in the Arizona Museum of Natural History. Well, those are all gone now. The Smithsonian used to have them. They're gone. The British Museum, they're gone. Where did they go? Why did people hide them?
They've been bought up by private collectors. Since World War II, they disappeared off the face of the earth. A lot of people call it a conspiracy. Before we go any further, I'm going to lift something up and show you here. There's never been anything like this written, and you won't find this very many places. Now, this is a book. Let me see if I can get this on the screen. It's so big, it takes a crane to lift up. How many pages is this book, Gary? Almost 500 pages, isn't it?
You know, Bob, you've got me there, but I think we could count them right quick.
The title of the book is Giants.
It's a giant
The
book.
cover of the book is fantastic. There are pictures in here of giants. There's pictures in here of people 10, 12 feet tall. The giants had a lot of other characteristics. Some of them had 6 fingers and 6 toes. Some of them supposedly had double rows of teeth. They were not normal human beings.
I took a quick peek while you were talking. It's right around 500 pages, and it's a 5-pound book. It's a giant book, let's put it this way, and there's nothing else like it on Earth. But we have had such a response to this in the past, which is why we're revisiting it.
Let's talk about Mount Hermon.
The gate of the fallen angels. As a matter of fact, the triple peaks of Mount Hermon are visible from northern Israel. They're adjacent to Syria, right around the border of Syria and Lebanon. And here's the interesting thing about that word Hermon, H-E-R-M-O-N. The name of the mountain comes down from an ancient Chaldean root word, which means to swear an oath. And Enoch says that it was upon that mountain that the fallen angels swore an oath that what they were about to do, namely to come down to earth and take earth women as their wives and to establish kingdoms for themselves, they swore that oath that none of them would abandon any of the others. In other words, that they would remain firm together, knowing that what they were doing was a sin in God's eyes. And so that's where the name of that mountain came from.
Well, we have pictures of that mountain today. It lies on the northern border of Israel. And who occupies that mountain today?
Well, it's occupied by the Syrians and by Hezbollah and by
the arch enemies of Israel.
The worst enemies of Israel. And it's been hostile territory since day one.
And it's hostile territory today. And every time I look at this picture, this cave in this magazine, I just can almost picture this happening. I want to read something from a book. This is my personal copy of the book. It's called The Gods of the Lodge. If you ever want to get just a fantastic book, we don't sell it here at the ministry. You can find it online. There's actually the author of the book went over to Mount Hermon back in the 30s, and he wrote about what Mount Hermon really was. And I think this is really important. This was just no normal mountain that lay within Israel. This was a place that was venerated as a place of Baal worship. And of course, we go back in history, we look at the Israelites, and what was their main sin? Idolatry. Over and over and over again, they left Jehovah and they followed after foreign gods. And it must have just driven the Lord crazy, that as good as he was to them, they would constantly leave the fold. But the author of the Gods of the Lodge, Reginald Haupt, writes here, Mount Hermon, the chief of the mountain of Palestine, is 5 miles wide and 20 miles long. It has 3 peaks, the tallest, which is 9,166 feet above the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries, even before Abraham, the mountain had been venerated in connection with Baal worship. Baal worship was the leading religion of Canaan. On most of the high peaks of the country were shrines known as the high places. The higher, the holier. And here groves were planted and shrines were erected for worship. Hermon towered over all the other mountains in the region. You know, one person translated the word Hermon as anathema.
So, a curse.
A curse.
At which, by the way, is that same word root. It is imprecation, anathema, or swearing a bad or a false oath.
So we know we have something. This is a bad place. You know, God had his mountain, being Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Satan had his mountain, being Mount Hermon. And this is where the fallen angels came to earth in a portal or a stargate or whatever you want to call it. We don't fully understand that.
Well, I think it was a dimensional portal. And there are many of those around the world. They are referred to in the Bible. There's one in Revelation chapter 9 called the well shaft of the abyss, where the fallen angels will be released in the latter days, and they'll come up out of the pit. Now, you could look high and low and never find that hole or that aperture that leads to the abyss, but it's there. The Bible says it's there, and I think there are similar apertures where the fallen angels come and go and have in the past.
So are we going to enter a dimensional portal one day when we hear the sound of the trumpet?
And it'll be straight to heaven, by the way.
In the twinkling of an eye.
I have a few little comments here, some notes that I brought. Celtic legends talk about giants. In Ireland, the giants were called Fomorians. In Britain, they were called Albion, the giant. In Greece, of course, they were called the Titans and the Olympians. In Sicily, ancient Italy, they were called Enceladins. The giants had names in all these ancient cultures. The Chaldeans had a group of people called the Izdubar living among them, who were said to be giants. The Babylonians, the Apocrypha of Barvak, an ancient writing, said that there were 4 million giants on earth before the flood. Now,
wow.
Can you believe that? I don't know. But whoever wrote that book thought there were a lot of giants.
Gary, how long were the giants here on earth, in your opinion? I know they were here for quite a long time, from what I've read.
In the days of Jared, who was the 6th man down from Adam, is when they came down and landed or touched down on Mount Hermon. So the days of Jared would be several hundred years before the flood. And they had a long time to essentially order things to suit them, to take command of the earth.
Well, they took command of the earth all right.
Yeah.
Not only did they, pollute the bloodline of man, but they ate the earth out of house and home, as the saying goes. Not only did they eat food beyond belief to, satisfy their enormous appetites, but then they began to hunt down man. And I don't know if they were cannibals. If that's what,
Actually, they were said to be cannibalistic. Another quick note, the Australian Aborigines say that there is a city called Burunga in Australia's northern quarter. It's a secret city occupied by giant white men who are at least 2 or 3 times taller than a regular man. That's just a myth that they have. The Maoris in New Zealand speak of a giant they called Tamakapua, who was a giant about 20 feet tall, and he had a whole race of people with him. I've got page after page after page of cultures from all over the world.
And that's covered in Stephen Quayle's Giants book.
Absolutely.
The whole second half of that book literally documents.
In fact, the notes are taken from his book. And when you go through this book, you'll be astounded at how common it was for people 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, to believe routinely in giant cultures.
Well, here's what we really want you to understand today. We're not here to sensationalize the Bible. There's a message here that everyone really needs to clearly understand. These giants came to planet Earth. They polluted the bloodline of mankind with the exception of Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives. So he saved those people. What happened to the earth, Gary, after God decided to draw a line in the sand, so to speak?
Well, when God looked down, and we're talking about the antediluvian era, and saw that man had been corrupted, irrevocably corrupted, he saw that the only thing that was possible to save the world was to destroy man, but he found one man and his family who had not been corrupted. And I take it that they lived out of the mainstream. That is, that they were not part of the mainstream pre-flood society. That would be Noah and the members of his family.
I think the Bible says that Noah was pure. I don't know what the Hebrew word is, but pure in his generation.
Pure, that is, uncontaminated in his generations. That is, his genome had not been touched by any of this interbreeding going on between the fallen ones and human beings.
You know, we see pictures, and you and I have talked about this off camera before. We see pictures of Noah building the ark and the people laughing at him and coming by and tormenting him. You don't think that's the case, do you?
I really don't, because you can read the account of Noah. We don't. Again, I wish we had time to do that, but we're running low on time right now. And what you read when you read about Noah is that he and his family appear to have been isolated. And they built the ark in isolation. The other people on earth didn't even know it was being built. I've called it the Area 51 of the pre-flood era. It was a secret project.
I've read that Noah actually moved his family to isolation out of fear of the fallen angels.
Right.
And they must have just populated the earth to such extent. I had never heard 4 million fallen angels or giants, and that's very possible that could be true.
And there is apocryphal literature, I believe the Book of Jasher and some other literature does say exactly that Noah and his family hid themselves in an isolated place. God came to him and had him build that ark to save the genome, if you will, of humanity and the animals that he had blessed.
So today we're all descendants of Noah's 3 sons, aren't we?
Well, we're all the descendants, and you know, that's very interesting, because we are all of one race on planet Earth. We all came out of Noah and Mrs. Noah and his 3 sons.
Now we've got to talk about one more thing and put the kids away, because this, I think, is really important. I know what some people are going to say. Gary, Bob, angels don't marry, it says it in the Bible, and they certainly don't have sex with human women. How do we interpret that? What actually happened when these angels, as the Bible says, left their first estate? How could that happen? It is a curious situation.
And Bob, we're down to just a very few minutes, and the best thing that I can say at this point is that other people have documented what the fallen angels did. Enoch documented the way in which they secured wives for themselves, and I'll be as delicate as possible. Stephen Quayle, in his book Giants, documents how these fallen ones, the Nephilim, and the later fallen ones called the Rephaim, and by the way, that comes from a word root that means Rapha, that means sick or ill or weakened. They came down to earth and they became less than they were in heaven. They became physical beings who carried a curse, but they also carried the ability to intermarry with and to father children with earth women.
Now you just said that they came back again. You mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
If God destroyed all the fallen angels and all of creation, for that matter, in the flood, and by the way, another subject that we'll get into on another day, they didn't just corrupt the genome of man. According to the book of Enoch, they corrupted the genome of animals,
That's right.
of birds, of fish. They were changing God's creation.
And that's a whole story that we haven't even talked about. It's the story of human-animal hybridization. It is the story of centaurs, of satyrs, of the mythical creatures of the Egyptians, of the Chaldeans. You see them in carvings and pictures, and you say, "Oh, those are pretty little things." Oh no, those were corrupt creations that were affected by the fallen angels. But that's another story.
One of the interesting things in this series on the book of Enoch is how these fallen angels actually requested, according to Enoch, that Enoch take a letter to God and beg God for forgiveness, which I had never heard before.
Yes.
I read Enoch's writings.
Absolutely amazing. Well, if you want to read more, and if you're interested in this subject, we have a giant book of some 500 pages by Stephen Quayle, and it's called Giants, $39.95. We also are offering a study that JR and I did on DVD. It's 6 hours of DVD studies on the book of Enoch, the best commentary on Enoch you can find. And I want you to know, for $29.95, this is just an excellent offer that we're making you. The two of them together we're calling the Giants Package, $59.95 plus shipping and handling, which is about $10 less than if you bought them separately. And again, we're going to, and I have so many things to hold up here, but I'll do it. We're going to offer you absolutely free the memorial edition of the Prophecy in the News dedication to J.R. Church, Called Unto Eternal Glory, which contains that great article that Bob talked about a minute ago, Mount Hermon, Gate of the Fallen Angels. That is what we're calling the Giants Package. Bob, wish we had more time.
Well, maybe we'll do another program on this one day.
I think
it's a fantastic subject.
We just scratched the surface. We need to do this again.
Well, if you don't understand Genesis 6, you don't understand the Bible. If you don't understand the fallen angels, you can't understand and grasp the Bible.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A great day in the Lord to all of you, and as we always say, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.